Hi, my name is Bryndis Whitson, and you're listening to the Zebras to Apples podcast, the fun and fascinating stories of supply chain logistics. Canada is a really vast country with a lot of intricacies as you drive across the country, and you're seeing it from a truck, from your car. And in 2022, my husband and I drove from Calgary, Alberta to Moncton, New Brunswick in 4.5 days. We did 4,700 kilometers along that period of time. We then after went to PEI and Nova Scotia and then continued back west. In total, it took us about 30 days for the entire trip. But I really wanted to kind of showcase in this episode what are some of the tips and tricks as you're driving across the country. What are some things to be mindful of, things to look out for, things to kind of consider. And so that's what we're kind of discussing today is more, moments that we should really kind of look into and really factor in if you're looking to drive across Canada in its vast and ever-evolving geography and supply chain. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. In 2022, my husband Scott and I drove from Calgary, Alberta to Nova Scotia, and we drove in our vehicle because it was timing, prices, etc. because it's 2022 and it's just after COVID or just during COVID, really, because I'd just gotten sick, and we decided to drive because the cost of a rental vehicle, if we'd flown, was so expensive. And luckily it was June, but we had a deadline of Saturday. And our original plan was that we were going to leave on the Saturday. We were going to take our time. And then my dad and the dog who were coming on the trip decided to not come on the Thursday, and we were leaving on Saturday. So we had to change all of our plans, figure everything else out, and we left on the Monday as opposed to Saturday. So we had to suddenly drive 4,700 kilometers in 4.5 days because we had to make sure that we were in New Brunswick by Saturday morning because the wedding was on Saturday afternoon. So we suddenly are now leaving on Monday at 1 p.m. as opposed to Saturday. So now we're on a tight time frame and we've got to drive across the entire country. And there's different sections that if you drive across Canada, you start to learn about. This is not my first time driving, at least to Quebec or Ontario, but there's things you have to consider. So I would regularly make the drive to Winnipeg for many years because that's where my grandparents lived. And so I'm used to get in the car, you drive 16 hours. If you're feeling really tired, you might stop in Brandon. These are your places that you stop. These are your areas, and you keep on going. As a Canadian, we a lot of time look at our travel in hours, not necessarily kilometers or timings. And so it's not unusual for Canadians to get into the vehicle and drive 16 hours to the next spot because you got to go visit your grandparents or, someone in 2 provinces over. So on this trip, we leave and we're like, okay, because we've run into experiences before where you don't have a place to stay at the end, but you just are going to hope for everything. So we drive from Calgary to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. That's the first kind of area. Really, we never quite knew where we were going because we were trying to maximize as much daylight as possible until we got tired. And so to give you an idea, it, according to Google Maps, is 7 hours and 12 minutes from Calgary to Regina, or just outside of Regina, which is Moose Jaw. And it's 692 to 743 kilometers. And so you just get in the car and you start going, but you learn things about different transportation systems. So, we're looking at the trucks, we're looking at the vehicles, we're, looking at various things, we're chatting, we're listening to music as much as we can. And we get to Moose Jaw and we're thinking, okay, it's Moose Jaw, we'll be fine. And we'll have a place to stay because it's Moose Jaw. It's a smaller, mid-sized kind of city. It's not too big. And every hotel room is booked in the entire town. But why? And we realized that every parking lot is full of white trucks. So if you get used to white pickup trucks and construction and different areas, whether you've been kind of in construction areas, you realize what these moments are about. And so you're like, okay, white vehicles means construction. What construction would be happening around Moose Jaw? And we're like, oh, okay, definitely around kind of one of the major train lines in Canada. They're having major reconstruction projects. So you factor those in. There's other kind of areas where you learn other kind of fun little random pieces of trivia. And it's just random pieces of trivia that I now just lodge in my head. Like, in Medicine, on the way into Medicine Hat, it's one of the steepest grades in the entire CPKC line, at least in Canada, because it's one of the steepest areas because you suddenly have to go into a valley when you go into Medicine Hat. So there's these kind of neat kind of pieces that suddenly happen. So the next day we go from Moose Jaw and we go all the way past Kenora, Ontario, which means that this is the day where we drive 3 provinces in one day. So we start in Saskatchewan, we drive across half of Saskatchewan, we drive across all of Manitoba, and we enter into Kenora, Ontario. And that one, just to give you an idea, according to Google Maps, is 865 kilometers or 8 hours and 23 minutes. And again, there's the little things that are a little different, and there's little intricacies for our country. So if you've ever have regularly driven to Winnipeg, there is this spot that a regular person who drives this road over their lifetime knows about something just that's called the tree. And it's flat and there you see like a lot of farmers fields and stuff like that. And there's suddenly this tree. And they have done everything possible to make sure this tree stays. It kind of spans over a little bit of the Trans-Canada, but out of nowhere, there's a tree right on the highway. And at the time, I posted a picture of the tree, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's the tree, the tree, the tree." So if you've ever driven that part, you know what the tree is. But you get in from like Moose Jaw to Regina. And this is where transportation, supply chain geek in me comes back again, because at the edge of Regina on the west side is a place called the Global Transportation Hub. So the Global Transportation Hub started, or GTH, started in June 24th, 2009. And it's kind of looking to be a really large inland port. And inland ports are locations where major railway lines, highway networks, distribution centers, etc., are all located within a certain geographic kind of land area. But in Calgary, that's not quite how our inland port is developed. But Regina, Winnipeg, etc., what it is. Kind of a very large conglomeration of land and different areas. In 2013, I was lucky enough to be able to fly to Regina and meet up with a researcher that we had named Jean Paul Rodrigue. And we were doing a study on refrigerated containers and refrigerated cargo, specifically its impacts in Western Canada, but also kind of across Canada. And so we were lucky enough to get a tour of Regina and of the 1 million square foot Loblaws facility, which services a lot of Western Canada's dry goods and refrigerated products for all of the Superstore, Loblaws, chain of foods. So no name, no frills, etc. So it's such a great facility. It's fascinating. And so every time I drive by now, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a global transportation hub. And now there's a sign to it. And this is what it is. And Scott, who I'm normally in the car with, and maybe his dad kind of humor me and listen to my stories, just kind of like I'm doing now. But it's, kind of so neat. But then you keep on going and you keep on going along the Trans-Canada Highway and you get to Winnipeg. Winnipeg as well, they have the area kind of around Winnipeg, which they have the perimeter highway, and they were one of the first cities in Canada to have an area where you kind of skirted the city so that if you were major trucks or driving through, you would go around. The other thing that I love about Winnipeg is they actually have CN and CP used to have, or and still do, they're both of their main lines are the CPKC go through Winnipeg. So when my mother was growing up in Winnipeg, my grandfather worked for the CN Railway. But a lot of other people work for CP Railway or CPKC now. And so it's a bit of a railway town, especially in the 1950s, 1960s, but it still has those roots. But Winnipeg is also this interesting moment where we go from prairies to, this is the geography major in me, we go from prairies and we start kind of going into more lakes and forest, and we go more into the Canadian Shield. And so when we decided to kind of pass through into Kenora, we were starting to lose daylight. And in this kind of spot of Kenora to Dryden, Ontario, is very fast, even though the speed limit is like 100 to 110 kilometers an hour. It is normally mainly a 2-lane highway. So 1 lane going west, 1 lane going east. And it, for me, is one of the scariest, most dangerous parts of the entire stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway. So, but that aside, we also ended up in a construction site, dust cloud, not really labeled. So we decide, let's stop for the night, and couldn't really find any place to stay. So that's one of the night we discovered that in Ontario, they have great rest stops, pullouts, areas where you can quickly kind of rest for a few minutes. You're not really allowed to sleep overnight. But in this case scenario, we decided this was the safest option for us. And then in a very typical Canadian drive across Canada, we slept in our van, and my husband, Scott, was able to because he was doing the majority of the driving, was able to really have a fairly good sleep in the passenger seat. I, however, not so much in the driver's seat because you got the steering wheel, you don't want to hit the brakes, you don't want to hit the gas, even though it's in park and everything's off. And you've got trucks whizzing by you on the highway. But we woke up at like 3, 4 in the morning to the call of the loon on the lake we were stopped by, and then said, okay, we're both up. Let's maximize the daylight as much as possible. And so, because we've also got a 1-hour time change happening at some point. And so now we go from Kenora, Ontario to Cochrane, Ontario. According to Google Maps, it is 1,200 kilometers and minimum of 13 hours. So at 4:30 in the morning, we set off to drive across Ontario. We know that driving across Ontario will take us at least 2 days because it's a very big province. Once you it goes and it goes and it goes and it goes and it goes some more and then it goes some more. And you also, when you're driving across Canada, you have to factor in, do I take the northern route or do I take the southern route? So the northern route, which is the way we took on the way to the East Coast, is Highway 11. You can also take Highway 17, which goes along the Great Lakes. You're going downhill as you go east and you go uphill as you go west if you take Highway 17. In 2007, we took Highway 17 to Ottawa. So we decided we would take Highway 11 on the other way there. Scott had never seen it. I had never seen it going east. And so we took Highway 11. The other reason we were taking Highway 11 is because it's a little bit quicker, especially when you have a quick timeline and you got to keep on going. And so we set out at, as I was saying, 4:30 in the morning, and in the time change, so 5:30. We didn't get to Cochrane, Ontario until just after 9 o'clock at night. So we just kept on going. So we were able to do the stretch between Kenora and Dryden in daylight at 4:30 in the morning with barely any cars, barely any traffic. And it was the most enjoyable time that I've ever had driving that stretch of road. To give you an idea on this stretch of road, it's very curvy. And like I was saying, it's mainly one lane either way. And so you have trucks or vehicles and cars that like tailgate on the section because they've got time to catch and they're tired of driving or whatever. And so they like to tailgate, they like to pressure. It's a very kind of not great stretch. I highly recommend it at 4:30 in the morning because it's great at that spot. So you get these other moments that are so wonderful. So you get this other piece though, where you go from kind of Dryden to Thunder Bay. If you ever look at a map of Canada, you're like, okay, it shouldn't be too bad. Shouldn't be too far. Shouldn't be, that awful. It just takes you 4 to 5 hours to drive that stretch. And you just keep on going and you keep on going because there's nowhere else to really go. You also, it's a lot better now, but when I did this route in 2007, 2008, there's a lot of cell phone dead zones as well too. And there's one point we went into on in 2008 when I was driving back with my mother, I went to a gas station and basically I think they spent most of their day telling people when they would get cell phone reception. And they would say, are you this company? You'll get it this corner. Are you this company? You'll get it this corner. They would just knew exactly when people were going to get cell phone coverage because that's just the stretch of the road. And so you just keep on going. But there's still kind of neat things to see along the way because there's trees, there's rocks, if you can look at those kind of things. But the thing I love about once you get into Thunder Bay is the type of rock that they have in Thunder Bay impacts the color of the highway. And so suddenly you go from gray highway, typical highway that you're normally looking at, and it suddenly around Thunder Bay has a very pink tinge to it, or like a little bit of a purple tinge. And that's because a lot of the rocks around Thunder Bay have amethyst. And so suddenly you've got like these, the highway suddenly has a purple pinkish tinge because they're actually using the local aggregate. And, there's kind of a great place to quickly stop. Every small town across the country has, or Thunder Bay is not a town, but it's a major city, but you have different things that are specific to their, like there's a certain donut here, there's a certain, thing here, there's monuments along the way, there is statues, there's things to keep you entertained as you suddenly drive past the world's largest Pasanka or in Fagerville, or you suddenly see the largest bunnock in Macklin, or all of these little kind of small towns have the world's largest something. And so at least in Thunder Bay, you can stop, you can do all those other things. There's a really great, and I am so grateful for this Canadian Tire, but they've got all these different spots along that way. But then you start to keep on going. And so you're still driving along 17. And shortly as you get to Nipissing, there's a bridge. And it truly is, the bridge at Nipissing is the bridge that unites the country at this one spot. And it's right before highway. You can either go Highway 11 or Highway 17, or Highway 17 and Highway 11 ends. And everything converges kind of right around this bridge. And this bridge is very, very important to the Canadian transportation system. So there was a bridge in 1974 that was built. There was also a bridge in 1937. I'm looking at kind of Wikipedia to make sure I've got the right information. This is my first time seeing this bridge because when I'd driven in 2007, 2008, this bridge had not been built yet, but I'd heard about this bridge. And part of the reason I'd also heard about this bridge is because it closed. And so the bridge reopens officially construction started in 2013. The full bridge opened in 2018, but it opened officially in November of 2015. So we've got the bridge, but then the bridge was closed to traffic in 2016, and they had to quickly figure out what was kind of occurring because the main deck girder failed during a winter storm, which caused the deck to actually lift 60 centimeters, and which of course would, for safety considerations, close the bridge. And so we had to quickly detour, but it's winter. You gotta quickly fix that out. But we were Canadians, especially when the entire livelihood of the Canadian transportation system is in the balance because of this actual bridge being shut down, they were able to partially reopen to traffic the next morning and after 17 hours. So they were able to really kind of make sure that they were improving the entire cable system, the entire system, to make sure it keeps on going. But that's why this bridge looks like a normal bridge, but it is truly the biggest connection between Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada to Western Canada. And it's this bridge that unites this country and our entire Canadian trucking transportation system. And it's just one of those things. So in this spot, we take the northern route at Nipigon. Once you span the bridge, then you decide you go which route you go. So this time we decided to go and take Highway 11, and we've still got quite a ways to go. And this is the other thing that I love as a geography major. This is where that kind of really kicks in, is because at a certain spot in this area, the water no longer flows either west or east. It actually flows north. And so and they tell you on the highway what the spot is. And so you have these kind of neat kind of things. So the other thing that happens especially in Highway 11, is it really is a true Canadian moment as well. I mean, everything's a true Canadian moment, but suddenly, especially around Kapuskasing, Hearst, Ontario, the majority speak French. And so you really are in Franco-Ontarian country in Canada. And so you learn, and so you're dialoguing a little bit more in French. There's also, we went into kind of a fast chain restaurant, and the pop machine wasn't working, and she was trying to explain that to us in French. And luckily we understood enough French to know what was kind of the situation, but we would reply in English, she would reply in French, and that's just kind of how the conversation went. And so at this spot, some guy is trying to fix this pop machine, but he probably doesn't have the right parts. And because you're in Northern Ontario, it's going to take a while for the parts to actually arrive. So that just adds in these extra supply chain issues that you see in these kind of spots. There's also kind of near Cochrane, Ontario, is where the start of another major train line system kind of kicks in. And so there's neat kind of spaces. Another kind of tidbit for you is if you're kind of in and around Cochrane, Ontario, and it's 9:00 at night and you're trying to find a place to stay, it's going to be a little tricky because, especially at least in the summer or late spring at 9:00, they've kind of shut down even if they have vacancies, they've shut down the offices. So if you don't have a place to stay, you're really looking. We did eventually find something, and we didn't end up having to stay another night in a rest stop. So then we go from Cochrane, Ontario, and neat, interesting sights. There was kind of Amish going into town all along the highway, a whole bunch of neat things. If you follow Google Maps, you get to a town called Matheson. And this is where what Google Maps tells you versus reality versus safety becomes a situation to consider. So at this point, Google Maps will tell you to then take the 101 as opposed to the 11. And the 101 will take you through Quebec immediately. And it's very lovely kind of area, but it's a little bit of off-roading, slower speeds, and you have potential for a flat tire, which I've had know people that have had flat tires because they took this route. But instead, if you continue taking the 11, it'll be an extra half an hour, but you'll be on a safe stretch of road where it'll be easy to get a tow truck if something goes wrong with your vehicle. There's more traffic, so there's more eyes on the situation. So when you get to that spot, if Google Maps tells you to take the 101 and not the 11, this is where you consider taking the 11. So you keep on driving. So we wake up, and we're driving down, and the 11 kind of starts to kind of smaller town, continues to go there. And then you reach North Bay. And when you reach North Bay, that's where the 11, the 17 reconnect. And then you continue along the Trans-Canada. But now you've reconnected those two kind of stretches that divide up. And North Bay, I've never been so excited to see a grocery store with a Sobeys or something like that in my life. Or at least at the time, I was like, oh my goodness, fresh vegetables and all these other things. I mean, there is fresh vegetables along the other route, but because of the distribution system, it's less serviced than North Bay is, because it's easier to get to North Bay. And so highly recommend it. And so you get to North Bay, and then you continue kind of driving along. This is where you start getting into kind of Deep River, Chalk River, where the nuclear reactors and power plants were in Ontario and still kind of are. Then you get into Petawawa, which is the military base and one of the largest bases in the country. And then you kind of head into Ottawa. And for us, we kind of kept on going through Ottawa because we had time. We're now already, it's already coming into Thursday, and we still have, to get from all of Quebec and all of New Brunswick. And so we got to Dorval. When you get to kind of the 417 in Ottawa to Montreal, it's a really good stretch of road. Very lot of service. It's not the 401 from on the southern route is really good as well too, because it's got a lot of rest stops. It's got a lot of service stations. It's really well designed for quick rest stops with a gas station, a fast food restaurant, and a convenience store. And then you go a bit fast food restaurant, a gas station, convenience store. And so and a spot for a washing break or whatever. And so similar with the 417, it's fast, it's quick moving. When you get into the Montreal kind of area, you have to kind of really know where you're going. You have to kind of pay attention. If you really are used to freeways, that's great. If you're not so used to freeways, it's very fast and there's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of lane switching. So you really have to be on your toes kind of at that spot. For us, we kind of hit 2 nights of not really a great sleeps. And so we stopped in Dorval for the night. So we continue on from Montreal the next day. Just to give you an idea, from Cochrane, Ontario to Dorval, it is 910 kilometers, or approximately 9 hours and 41 minutes, according to Google Maps. So then the next day, we're in the home stretch. We go from Dorval to Moncton, New Brunswick, and that one is approximately 1,017 kilometers, and it takes you about exactly 10 hours, according to Google Maps. And so we ended up also with a bit of rain, and so for safety, of course, we weren't going as fast, but you continue kind of going. You're going along the St. Lawrence Seaway, which hopefully we'll get a chance to really chat about in another episode. And you can continue on, and then you get to kind of River Delu, and one of my favorite spots along the route. which is a great name for a location, which is St. Louis de Haha. I love kind of seeing that. And I also know that I'm in the home stretch New Brunswick when I see that too. So you go through Grand Falls, you go through Edmundston, you go through all of these different kind of areas. In Quebec, it's kind of a lot of divided highway, pretty good stretches. And when we were there in 2023, there was a lot of construction happening on the Quebec to New Brunswick route. So a lot of good additions to, divide the highway a little bit more. Your geography really becomes a lot of trees and bushes, etc. And you keep on going. So we finally made it to New Brunswick at not quite 10 o'clock at night, but the rehearsal dinner was complete and we made it in time for the wedding. So that's just kind of a span of what it takes to like the different things that you see along the Trans-Canada Highway, along those kind of routes. But, there's the other kind of factors because we've also, later that trip went to Nova Scotia, in different areas there. When you're driving to Prince Edward Island, you take the Confederation Bridge, or you can take the ferry from PEI to Nova Scotia. The Confederation Bridge is from New Brunswick to PEI. And so you kind of see these kind of areas where you kind of drive across. You don't pay to enter, but you pay to leave for the Confederation Bridge. And the other thing with the Confederation Bridge is make sure you stay the speed limit because they clock you. They take a picture of your license plate on the way in, and they take a picture of your license plate on the way out. And if you have gone faster than this certain route, you're definitely a little bit kind of too fast, and you will get a ticket. Between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, there is a stretch of highway. If you also take the Trans-Canada to Newfoundland, you actually take the ferry from kind of near Sydney to either Port aux Basques or St. John. And that is kind of a 15-hour minimum kind of ferry ride. One, and that's the one to St. John. I think that one's 16. The other one's 9. And so you do those kind of ferries. When you're taking the north on the way back, we took the, when we were driving through Ontario, we took the 17. And on the 17, and on our way back on Canada Day, we actually took North Bay, Ontario to Terrace Bay, Ontario, along the 17, which takes you along the Great Lakes. So Manitoulin Island, it takes you kind of along Lake Superior. It takes you along kind of a few other Great Lakes. And so that one is 911 kilometers or approximately 10 hours to take that route. On the way west, you go up. So you go up in elevation on the way. If you're going east, you're going kind of down. So those are kind of factors to bring in for like braking kind of in and around those areas. If your vehicle takes premium, make sure you fill up at a certain spot because there's less premium available. And it's just a consideration. And so these are kind of different factors that you bring in with kind of the Canadian transportation system. And I can geek out all day long, as you can tell, because I've already talked for quite a bit, just talking about driving across the country, or at least from Alberta to Nova Scotia and back. That's kind of part of the reason I love our great country and its transportation system. This is just a short window into a 47 100-kilometer journey in 4.5 days. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to this Zebras to Apples podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed the showcase of the fun and fascinating stories of supply chain logistics. If you liked this episode, I would love it if you could give it a rating and review. For more information about this topic, you can go to zebrastoapples.com or follow Zebras to Apples on the social media platform of your choosing, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter X, Blue Sky, or LinkedIn. You can support the show on Patreon. Also, check out the show notes below. Please join me again for another episode of Zebras to Apples. Have a wonderful day.